Homemade grape brandy recipe. Moonshine Life recipes. This time we will prepare a real grape brandy and try to follow the classic recipe to the letter. Overcoming French masters is almost impossible, but we will do our best to make a decent alcoholic drink at home. White Muscat varieties that have a peculiar aroma are the best choice for this recipe, but you can use any grapes that grow in your garden. Just make sure the grapes are ripe. The use of Saperavi, Coquetti and Cabernet is not recommended because these berries contain tannins that make the brandy very hard. Ingredients: grapes 30 kilos, sugar 2.5 kilos optional, water 4 liters, oak chips or a barrel. Note: the amount of water and sugar depends on the juice and sugar content and the acidity of the grapes used. The exact proportions will be indicated in the description of the technology. If cherries are sweet, you can skip adding sugar. You will obtain a pure wine spirit with a fine aroma. Grape brandy recipe. Preparation of raw materials for wines. Brandy alcohol is obtained by double or triple distillation of young wine in a distillation still. In France, copper still is used. So, first you need to make a wine. Separate the unwashed ripe grapes from the stems and crush together with the seeds. The surface of the grapes contains wild wine yeast, so you should not rinse them. Otherwise, the wort will not ferment. You can clean very dirty grapes with a piece of dry cloth. If you harvested grapes after the rain or washed them, it is best to use a store-bought wine yeast. Pour the obtained dough into an enamel or plastic container with a wide neck. Add sugar at a rate of 1 kilo per 10 liters of crushed grapes optional, water, 1 liter per 7.5 kilos of grapes, and stir. Cover the container with a clean cloth to protect it from insects and leave for 4 days in a warm, dark place. After 12 to 18 hours, you will see a floating pulp lid, which prevents fermentation. This layer must be crushed by stirring the wort 2 to 3 times a day with a clean wooden stick. To prevent a future wine from souring, it is recommended to stir the must on the first day of fermentation. 4 days after the crushing of the grapes it shows signs of fermentation. It will have an indicative wine smell, foam and hissing sound, and the whole pulp will resurface. Now it's time to filter the wort. To do this, gently decant the juice into another container and strain the pulp with a cotton cloth with your hands or with the press, but do not crush the seeds. After straining, pour the liquid into the juice container. Add sugar at a rate of 1 kilo per 10 liters optional. There is no more need for effort. After stirring, pour the fermented grape juice into a glass or plastic container for fermentation, filling up to 70% of its volume to leave enough space for carbon dioxide and foam. Then, install an air lock on the neck of the container. Transfer the container to a dark place at a temperature of 18–27 degrees Celsius. Fermentation under a glove. On average, fermentation lasts 18 to 40 days, depends on temperature and yeast activity. When that time passes, the decompression chamber stops bubbling or the glove deflates, there is a layer of sediment on the bottom and it should be lighter. You will end up with a wine that has 10 to 14% ABV. You can proceed to the next step. Getting the spirit of wine. Decant the young wine in a distillation. You can strain it with gauze for proper cleaning. Perform rapid distillation so that less hazardous substances are produced without fractionation. Stop collecting alcohol when the race number drops below 30 degrees. To obtain pure wine spirit, further distillation is required. Before starting it, dilute the double distillate with 20% water. During the third run, remove the first 4% of the pure ethanol measured previously. This is the fraction of heads. Collect the distillate until the ABV drops below 45%. A 45 to 30 degree product, called a tail, can be used for other purposes as it is not suitable for homemade brandy. Infusion. For the brandy hearts to be transformed into brandy, it must be infused with oak. There are 2 options for how this can be done. The first is to buy an oak barrel, but for several reasons, this method is used by few. The second way is easier and cheaper, infusing oak stakes or splinters. You can find oak stakes, chips in stores or make it yourself. You will need an oak tree at least 50 years old. These trees have a trunk diameter of 30 to 35 cm. Bark, sawdust and shavings are not suitable because they contain many tannins that make cognac hard. It is desirable that the felled tree remain in the rain and snow for several years. This provides a natural immersion that reduces the concentration of tannin substances. Pour fresh firewood with boiling water. Drain the infusion after 10 minutes and then dip the pins in cold water for 20 to 30 minutes and dry. Cut the 10 to 20 cm long oak stump into 5 to 8 mm thick pieces. The pins should fit in a 3-liter jar used to infuse brandy. Then place the pieces in pots, 20 to 30 pieces in each. Before brewing, dilute the distillate with 42 to 45 degrees water. Then, pour the brandy diluted in the bottle with pegs, oak chips, seal and leave for at least 6 to 12 months in a dark and cold place, cellar. Infuse cognac for longer to improve its quality. However, infusing homemade brandy for more than 3 years is useless. After all, it is not a barrel. The taste and color of cognac depend on the properties of the oak. The infusion period of the peg can vary, so you should try your homemade brandy at least once every 3 to 4 weeks. Typically, pin manufacturers indicate the ideal amount and timing for the infusion, and you should follow these instructions. Brandy in pots. Caramelization. This is an optional step during which the color and flavor of the cognac are slightly altered. Even after infused with oak for a year, homemade cognac does not always acquire a characteristic dark color. If you don't like it, it is necessary to do the caramelization. Almost all French cognacs also contain caramel, so there is nothing wrong with that. The amount of caramel depends on individual preferences. For some, it is no more than 50 grams per 3 liters. After adding the caramel, the cognac is mixed, corked and aged for 7 to 10 days. Bottling. In the final stage, strain the homemade brandy in a layer of cotton and bottle. Now let's go to the tasting. Enjoy. Moonshine Life Recipes.